I suppose it's technically possible to tell a story without characters. But I can't imagine it would be a particularly engaging story. After all, a world with no people, not even NPCs, feels more like a setting description than a story. So today, I want to talk about characters. Specifically, I want to talk about the one thing that will help you create characters that fit your world, drive your plot, and enhance your narrative. These characters don't just exist in your story, but actively drive the plot. They speak to your readers, drawing them in, forcing them to turn the page. Welcome to Just in Time World Building with your host, Marie Mullaney. Before we jump into what this is that you need to do with your characters, let's do some background work by looking at the different types of characters you'll typically find in a novel. First, you have your protagonists, your main characters, the ones who push the plot forward and, more often than not, experience the most growth. Then there are the antagonists, the ones who oppose the protagonists. They might be villains, but not always. Sometimes they're just people whose goals and beliefs clash with the protagonist. And finally, you have your supporting characters, the ones who help flesh out the world. They might be there to support the antagonist, or to act as foils, or to fill other plot-critical roles. Beyond their function and story, characters also fall into two broad categories when it comes to character arcs. You have characters who grow and change, either in a positive or a negative way. And you have characters who stay the same, also known as static or flat characters. Not every character needs a major transformation. Some serve as steady anchors in the narrative. Take Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, for example. He's the same wise, self-assured mentor from start to finish. On the other hand, characters with growth arcs can go in two directions. A positive arc where they overcome their flaws and grow into their strengths, and a negative arc where they fall deeper into their flaws, leading to tragedy. Okay, so now we have a broad overview of the character types and the growth arcs. Let's get into the real question. How do you create a compelling character in a fantasy story? For me, it always starts with the internal tension of the character, which is best generated, in my opinion, by a mismatch of plot motivation and character motivation. So let's explore that next and why it's such a great provider of conflict. What makes a character truly compelling? It's not their personality quirks or even their magic or their abilities. Those things help, sure, but they aren't what really draw the readers in. In my opinion, what makes a character great is internal tension, the emotional conflict within them. And one of the best ways to create that tension is by setting up a clash between what the character wants and what the plot demands of them. A character's life motivation is their ideal goal, the thing they'd be pursuing if left to their own devices. Maybe they crave security, love, power, revenge, or just a quiet life with good food and no trouble. That is their internal driving force. But then comes the plot motivation, the thing that drags them into the story and into the external conflict. Plot motivation picks the character up, shakes them, and forces them to act. The juxtaposition between life motivation, what do I want out of life, and plot motivation, why am I involved in the story, creates internal conflict. And that struggle, how will this be resolved, is what keeps readers invested. Let's take a look at some examples, starting with Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. Frodo's life motivation is to live peacefully in the Shire, surrounded by friends and good food. He has no desire for adventure or heroism. But then, the One Ring comes into his possession, forcing him to leave everything behind and embark on a dangerous journey. He doesn't want to be a hero, but the plot gives him no choice. This creates Frodo's internal tension, and that struggle between his longing for home and his responsibility to destroy the ring drives his character arc and deepens the emotional stakes of the story. Next, let's talk about Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games. Her life motivation is survival and protecting her family. In an ideal world, she'd just keep hunting and providing for her loved ones in District 12. But the plot forces her to volunteer for the Hunger Games to save her sister, and this act of survival thrusts her into a larger role she never wanted, that of a revolutionary. Katniss doesn't want to be a leader, but the world keeps forcing her into that role. Her personal desires and the expectations placed upon her are in constant conflict, making her journey both compelling and tragic. Speaking of tragedy, another great example is Fitzchivalry Farseer from Assassin's Apprentice. He just wants to belong and to be accepted. As a royal bastard, he grows up longing for acknowledgement and a place to call home. And that self-same noble blood is also the plot motivation, because it makes him a political pawn, and so he's trained as an assassin to serve the crown. On top of that, his wit magic isolates him even further. This creates enormous internal tension. Fitz is torn between his personal desire for peace and the duty that constantly pulls him back into danger. Every time he gets close to happiness, like with Molly, the plot drags him away again. His life motivation, belonging, feels permanently out of reach because this plot motivation, duty, keeps forcing him into the shadows. And as a final example, let's take a look at Jill from Catherine Kerr's The Devery Cycle. Jill wants to be a wandering swordsman, independent and free to live as she pleases. But the plot has other ideas. Her past life karma and Navain's interference keep pulling her toward a destiny she doesn't want, becoming a magician. Jill's struggle against her fate lasts through multiple books. She wants to carve out her own life, but the weight of reincarnation and duty keep forcing her onto a different path. Her growth arc is about reconciling who she wants to be with who destiny demands of her. All of these characters are compelling because their life motivation, what they want for themselves, is constantly at odds with their plot motivation, what the world forces them into. If Frodo wanted to carry the ring, if Katniss wanted to be a revolutionary, if Fitz wanted to be an assassin from the start, there would be no internal struggle with these characters. The fact that they resist, that they hesitate, that they question their path, that is what makes them interesting. Before we continue, allow me to tell you how to get even more out of this channel and out of my content. And allow me to thank the members of Just in Time Worldbuilding, who give me a small amount of money every month and allow my income to have a certain stability in this channel, which allows me to keep making more and better videos, including investing in some additional attributes of the channel. If you would like to get access to custom worksheets and members-only live streams, as well as access to some of my content weeks in advance, you can join the members of the channel for as little as a cup of coffee a month. There's a join button down below. However, there is another free way in which you can support the channel and you can get more content out of me, and that is to sign up on my website for my newsletter. And there is a link to that down below. The newsletter comes out once every 3 months, and it covers all kinds of deeper thoughts on world building and projects I'm busy with. So if either of those sound interesting to you, links down below. Okay, back to our scheduled viewing. Now, you don't have to build in this internal tension up front. You don't have to put it in immediately. Internal conflict can grow over the course of a novel. Some characters start off embracing their role, their plot role, only later realizing the cost to themselves. Others might not even be aware of their life motivation at the start, only recognizing it once the plot pulls them in a direction they never expected. Here's the thing about internal tension. It doesn't have to start as a massive, obvious conflict. It can begin as a small grain of doubt, a subtle resistance that slowly grows into a crisis point. I tried to do this in The Hidden Blade, the first book in my Sangwheel Chronicles series. Now, I don't know if I pulled this off. If you've read it, let me know in the comments if you think I have. But here's what I was aiming for with the character Louis' arc. At the start of the book, Louis has a small conflict with an order he receives from herself. He's told to travel to another city and eliminate an entire family. He doesn't want to do it, and that reluctance is clear right from the beginning. But he has been trained for obedience, so off he goes. Over the course of the book, his hesitation grows. By the midpoint, his Act 2 crisis, he unalives someone he really doesn't want to remove from the census, and in that moment experiences a mini crisis of conscience. Now, obviously, he's a trained assassin and he's a hardened one, but this particular death is different. It crosses a line he never thought he would, and once he's on the other side, it sends him spiraling into crisis. This growing internal conflict culminates in the book's final act, where he can't bring himself to follow through. His ultimate confrontation isn't just with his target, it's with the person who gave him the order in the first place. And that moment forces him to come to terms with who he has been trained to be versus who he is. And this sets up the rest of his arc through the rest of the series, where that internal resistance continues to build against the life he was shaped for. So that's what I tried to do with Louis' character arc. Did I succeed? I leave that up to my readers to decide. But let's talk about another example of this slow-burning conflict that certainly did succeed. And that example is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the start of the series, Zuko is completely focused on one goal, regaining his honor and earning his father's approval. He believes that capturing the Avatar is the only way to achieve this. But as he chases Aang, he begins to see the cracks in his beliefs. He meets people who challenge his worldview. His Uncle Iroh, the people of the Earth Kingdom, even the Avatar himself. His breaking point comes when he's given exactly what he thought he wanted. His father welcomes him back. But it doesn't make Zuko happy. Instead, he realizes that he's been chasing the wrong thing all along, and his arc culminates in him rejecting his father, helping Aang, and embracing the person he wants to be. What makes Zuko's journey so compelling is that his internal conflict doesn't start as a crisis. It builds slowly, shaped by small moments of doubt and realization, until he finally reaches a point where he can't ignore it anymore. So if you want to introduce internal tension, it doesn't have to be immediate or dramatic from the start. It can grow slowly, a seed of doubt that turns into hesitation, then full-blown resistance as it reaches breaking point. And that breaking point, that's what makes the character arc feel earned. But doing it that way means that you have to continually generate that tension. So let's talk about how to balance the internal conflict with the external action. Because after all, fantasy stories don't just happen in the character's head. So sure, an internal conflict is great. But if your character is just sitting around and brooding for an entire book, your readers are going to get frustrated. Unless they're Twilight fans. Twilight fans might be fine with a character brooding for a whole book, but then you also have to write sparkling vampires. So upsides and downsides, you know what I'm saying? Sorry, Twilight fans, but you know it's true. She sat and brooded for way too freaking long. Anyway, to keep the story engaging, you need to balance internal conflict with external action. The key is making sure that internal struggles drive external choices and that external events trigger internal reflection. So, first, you should make internal conflict show up in external choices. Your character's internal struggle should push them to make decisions that affect the plot. Every time they hesitate, push forward, betray their principles, or double down on their beliefs, it should change something in the external world. Take Zuko, for example. His growing doubts don't just exist in his thoughts, they manifest in his actions. He starts questioning his mission, which leads him to help strangers instead of hunting Aang. He lets Appa go instead of capturing him, even though it means failing in his quest. And when he finally decides to reject his father, he doesn't just think about it, he takes action, confronting Ozai and leaving the Fire Nation. Louis in The Hidden Blade follows the same pattern. His growing discomfort with his orders don't stay in his head. It builds until he physically refuses to follow through, which puts him into direct conflict with herself. His internal doubts aren't just thoughts, they push the plot forward. So, when writing internal conflict, always ask, how does this change the choices the character makes? How does this shape the external story, and what's at stake if they choose one way or another? If an internal conflict doesn't affect what the character does, then it's just background noise and it might as well not be there. Secondly, you should use external events to force internal reflection. External events should push your character into moments of self-doubt, realization, or crisis. Think about Katniss Everdeen. She doesn't just wake up one day and think, maybe I should be the face of a revolution. No, external events keep forcing her into positions where she has to choose between survival and rebellion. Every time she faces a brutal moment in the games, every time she's used as a pawn, every time someone she cares about suffers, it fuels her internal struggle. The same thing happens with Fitz. Every time he tries to carve out a peaceful life, something external drags him back in. Royal politics, his wit magic, the expectations placed on him. Those external pressures force him to confront his internal conflicts. So when writing external events, ask yourself, how does this challenge what the character believes? Does this moment push them toward change or make them double down? How does this force a new level of internal tension? If an external event doesn't pressure the character's internal struggle in some way, it's just noise, and it might as well not be there. 3. You should weave internal and external conflict together. The best stories weave these two conflicts so tightly together that they become inseparable. The character's internal journey should make the external story more intense, and the external events should deepen the internal struggle. Think of it like a feedback loop. You have internal conflict. It leads to external choices, which creates consequences which force more internal conflict until the tension explodes into a major turning point. This is what makes character-driven fantasy so compelling. Readers aren't just watching the plot unfold. They're watching the characters struggle and grow because of the plot. So, balance internal conflict with external action. Make the internal conflict show up in the character's choices and use your external events to trigger self-reflection, weaving it together so that they're constantly influencing each other. If you do this well, you'll create characters that don't just react to the story, they drive it forward. And that is what keeps readers hooked. Which character do you think has the best internal conflict? Let me know in the comments. And thank you to all of the members of the channel who not only get early access to these videos, but also help me feed my cats every day. A very big shout out to Lupex Lakeshire, Katie Kofi Mug and Tony Lamana, just-in-timers of the Build It in Stone level, and Moxowen, Pablo Barrios, Glacier Maniac, Patricio, Carrie, Aya Shimimaru, Tiffany Felix and Dylan Batera, just-in-timers of the Build It in Wood level. If you're hungry for more world building, check out my video on different kinds of antagonists, or whatever the algorithm is recommending for you right now. And I will see you soon for another episode from Just-in-Time World Building, where we build what we need, when we need it.